Pull up a seat, let your heart unwind. We'll sip on dreams, one thought at a time. Bring your favorite tea, let it steep and flow. In the stillness here, we'll let
Hey, dreamers, welcome back to another episode of the Dear Dreamer podcast. If this is your first time, welcome. Welcome in. We're so glad that you're here. I'm so glad to have you, right? I'm glad that you are here. I'm glad that I am here. I'm glad that we are here together once again on the Dear Dreamer podcast. So, let me tell you a little story because I think that God has a extreme sense of humor. I don't know about you, but in my relationship with the Lord, he has a extreme sense of humor in my life, right? And I think that he's been setting me up for this series in ways that I didn't even realize until I sat down to record this episode, right? So here's what happened. November through December was supposed to be a heavy travel season for me. I mean, it was supposed to be like back and forth here and there, airport suitcases, all of that, right? Changing clothes, switching around, flying from here to there. That was the plan. So the plan was this. I was supposed to fly out of Chicago to San Diego for a weekend, right? Then I was supposed to fly from San Diego to Nashville for about a week and a half with my family for Thanksgiving. And I was also supposed to do a book read around with Michelle, my bonus mom, while I was there, right? Then I was supposed to fly back to Chicago and turn right back around and fly to California again for my graduation from Concordia University, Irvine, right? For my master's degree, y'all. Then I was supposed to fly from California to North Carolina. That was the plan. Okay. But here's what actually happened. While I was in Nashville, it started snowing in Chicago. And I'm not really talking about like a little bit of dusting. I'm talking about it started snowing heavily, right? And it was snowing over a course of days, but it wasn't snowing all at one time. It would like snow, it would dump a little snow, and then it would pause for like a day or two, and then it would dump another load of snow, and then it would pause for another day or two. And the forecast was showing that more snow was coming right when I was supposed to fly back to Chicago and when I was supposed to fly out of Chicago to go to California, right? So now here's the thing. My graduation was a big deal for me, right? It was like, a big moment for me. I worked really hard for this degree. It was something that I didn't really plan to do, right? Going back for my master's degree really wasn't in my plans, but that's the way that God led me. And so when I, went through the process and I finished the degree, I wanted to celebrate that, right? Because it wasn't just a ceremony for me, it was a monument, it was a milestone for my life, right? And it meant something important to me. And I wasn't about to risk getting stuck in Chicago because of weather and missing it. So I made a decision. I'm not going to fly back to Chicago, right? And I was going to stay in Nashville until it was time to go to California. And that decision changed everything in the trajectory of everything, right? Because my calendar was already winding down for the year. Some of my clients couldn't make their appointments, and I wasn't really accepting any new bookings for the rest of 2025. We were done. Book closed, right? And instead of running from one thing to the next, I was just there in Nashville with my family. I went to the gym almost every day. I tried different fitness classes. I laughed with people. I ate good food. I played games. I had real conversations with my family and some friends. And my dad, I'm a daddy's girl. So, okay, my dad made sure I was well taken care of, as he always does. And, my brother was in the middle of a huge transition in his life, right? And so he was moving from Richmond to California. So he was in Nashville for about a month during that time. in between his move, right? And I have another brother who lives there in that Nashville area. My sister came up for Thanksgiving with the girls. And so I got time with my aunties and my uncles and my cousins. And it was super sweet, right? It was so sweet. Like the time that I got to spend in Nashville was just perfect timing. And it was exactly what I needed on a whole lot of different levels. And to top all of that off, my North Carolina trip got canceled too. So I just stayed in Nashville until my graduation, flew to California for the ceremony, and then I flew back to Nashville because it was only going to be like a week from in between my graduation and Christmas. So I stayed in Nashville instead of flying back to Chicago and then going right back to Nashville. And that could have, like, that whole back and forth could have been frustrating. And I could have been annoyed with all the plans changing and all the things that felt like they may have been falling apart, right? But honestly, just felt like God was giving me a space of rest. It was like he was saying, here, take this. I'm giving you this opportunity to slow down, right? And the graduation, it was even more special than I anticipated. It was even more intimate than I would have planned. I never had a graduation ceremony like this. It was very family oriented, very community oriented. I got to spend time with my family and my classmates. And what was unique about the graduation was, you go to graduations and normally they have you lined up and you're walking through, your family's all sitting in the seats or in the gymnasium or the football field or wherever it is that your graduation is, right? But the special thing about this one was it was a um parade graduation. I don't know if you've ever experienced anything like that. I hadn't either. And I didn't really understand what they were saying, like in the communications to us about the graduation, because I was like, this is weird. I don't understand. I feel like it's not making sense. But what happens is we start at one location on the campus and then we walk with not just with our classmates, we walk with our entire family. Um, through the graduation parade. Professors are on the sides, they're cheering, all that kind of stuff. And then we're walking through the entire campus until we get to the stage area. And then our family separates and they go on one side. So they're able to watch you walk across the stage and you walk across the stage. And then you and your family meet again and you go through the tunnel of parading and that's it, right? But it was amazing. It was such a sweet time. It felt like a very well into the journey, at Concordia. It was perfect because the whole experience was an intimate experience. The whole degree was an intimate experience. And so, the way that they ended it just felt like a icing on the cake because it just kept that whole thing intimate, right? And so I loved it. That was so sweet. It was so sweet. But going back to the story, nothing felt rushed. Everything just felt like it was smooth, right? And then the story doesn't end there, right? This is where things get real interesting, right? So I finally get back to Chicago and I walk into my apartment ready to knock some things out. Like I was ready to get to work. So it's like, okay, we've rested for like a month. We've been, kind of chilling. We haven't been doing a whole lot of this, that, and the third. We hadn't had to be anywhere for real. So we were resting, right? And so I walked into my apartment ready to like, all right, let's get things ready for 2026. And I had no internet, like no internet. And I know, like, I went and played with the box and the box wasn't working. Still gave me a red dot. I found out that the red dot is not good, right? I checked the bill because I was like, wait, I did pay the bill. I know I paid the bill, right? Let me just check. And so I checked and I definitely paid the bill like I thought, right? So I called AT&T and T and they came out and looked at everything. And here's what they tell me. The box outside of your home that conducts the internet into your home is frozen and old. And we're going to have to replace the entire thing and rewire everything back to your apartment. Did y'all even know that that was a thing that could happen? I didn't. Hi, my name is Candace, and I had no clue that that's something that could happen. I'd never heard of that, right? I had no idea that your internet box could just freeze because it's that cold, but apparently it can, and mine did. Well, here's the thing about my building. It's an older building. It's all brick. And so the older buildings around it, I mean, the buildings around it are all older too. And they're all brick as well. And even though they've all been renovated on the inside, the brick is still bricking, right? Which means that my cell phone signal was also very poor. I have terrible signal in this without internet, right? And so I have Verizon and I get one bar, maybe two. I get one in a possible if I'm standing in very specific spots in my house, right? Which means that when my Wi-Fi went down, I basically had no connection to the outside world. I was off the grid in my apartment in Chicago by myself, right? And so when I told my friend Ashley what was going on, she said, God must really want to talk to you. And I said, apparently he does. Apparently he does. And he will. And he will, right? This one thing I know for sure about my relationship with God is when he would like to get my attention, he will move everything out of the way in order to get that done, right? And here's what I realized during that week of silence. Sometimes in our prayer time, we think we're supposed to always have something to say, right? Or we think that God is always supposed to have something to say to us. But sometimes he just wants our presence. He just wants us to rest in him. And there's nothing required in that space. Nothing to do, nothing to say. Sometimes God really just wants us to be, right? And you know what? The sign of a good relationship, whether it's with God or with people, is being able to sit in quiet without it being weird. It got so quiet in my apartment that week. So quiet. And when I finally got the internet back, it still didn't feel weird to not have any noise, right? I actually just kept the quiet going. I forgot at moments that I had internet and I could do other things because the silence just felt good. It felt good to turn everything off and to be in the silence alone with God in my apartment, right? And normally I would have something playing or something going on in the background, sometimes like some jazz or something. But I actually really do enjoy silence. But when I do have something playing in the background, it's like light jazz or soft ambient noise, right? I don't like a whole lot of noise in my space. I like it to be quiet. I really do enjoy the quiet, but not normally that quiet. But no, I just kept it quiet, I kept the space in the way that it felt like was required for the transition between years, right? So I didn't get internet back until 2026. So God really wanted us to transition from one year to the next in silence. And so sitting with God in that space became um, a premise, if I can say that word, a premise for how to go through 2026. And when I started wanting to do things and get stuff done for 2026, when I wanted to work on projects, I just felt like even coming into 2026 after the internet was back, there were moments where I just felt like God was saying, no, just rest. I'll release you to do certain things when I am ready. And that's how this whole year has been unfolding. It's like, no, not yet. Okay, move on this. Here's how to do this better. Move on that. Right? Nothing has felt rushed. Nothing has felt like it's got to happen right now. It's just been flowing at the pace that I feel like God wants me to work this year. Right. And what's been sweet about that is it feels like a lot of things are flowing from a rested space instead of flowing from me just wanting to get stuff done. Now there are moments where like I have as a surge of like, I'm working, I'm in a flow right now, right? And then there are moments where I feel like God is like, just sit with it, just sit in the space, read this book, listen to this podcast, sit in silence, read the Bible, study this real quick, sit with me, talk to me, write in your journal, and I've just been kind of allowing that space to unfold and work in that space that God has been allowing me to see this year in a way that feels like being in a rhythm with God. That's good. And I think that ushering into this year was perfect for walking into this series together, right? Because if I had come into a series about learning to rest without actually having rested, right? If I was trying to teach you about living from rest and leading from rest and building from rest while I was still running on empty, I would have been doing both of us a disservice, right? But God is so kind and He's so meticulous and He is so, so detailed that He made sure that I came into this series from a place of rest so that I could speak about something that He actively is having me do, right? Not that there weren't, me and God have been wrestling with rest since 2017. Like He's been teaching me things about rest and showing me things in the Bible about rest and making me rest, right? Since 2017 in different seasons on and off. Like He's just been continuing to bring back rest in my life and bring back the word rest and why it's important. And so this is not something that just came up out of nowhere overnight, but it is something that He is actively trying to get us to understand, right? And so here we are in this rest series, in this resting rhythms series, right? Where we get to learn how to align, abide, and rest with God. So before I give you some solutions, right? I want to name some problems because I think a lot of us don't really realize how tired we are. We've adopted in our lives this rhythm of hustle, this rhythm of busyness, right? And we've normalized it. We call it, I'm busy, or I got a lot going on in this season, or I'm adulting, right? But exhaustion has a shape and it is worth naming, right? Because what does living outside of rhythm actually look like? You might wake up already behind, the alarm goes off, and your first thought isn't gratitude or let me sit in the presence of God. It's your to do list, it's the things that you have on your plate. And before your feet even hit the floor, right, your nervous system's already activated. You reach for your phone, you start scrolling through your emails or Instagram, checking your notifications, and something in your chest tightens before the day has actually even begun, right? And so when you're in this space, you might be moving through your mornings on autopilot, right? Your coffee might feel unrested time. It might feel chaotic. Maybe you have kids and you're trying to deal with them and do all the things, right? And so you're present, but you're not really present. Yes? Your body is in the room, but your mind is like on task 380 for the day, right? Your mind's already solving dinner time problems when you barely have gotten into the morning. Right? You might be answering questions mentally, composing emails that you're about to send. You might be physically with people, but you're emotionally already somewhere else before the day even begun, right? And by mid morning, you're basically running on caffeine and cortisol. So you're productive, but it's a brittle kind of productivity. right? It's the kind that snaps when interrupted. Yeah? So small inconveniences like this can feel like personal attacks. It can feel like those are the moments where we can sometimes be like, the enemy is busy, right? And we're giving the enemy way too much credit because sometimes isn't he's like, I'm minding my business. I'm not even bothering you today. You're not even on my checklist, right? It's because we've become so busy, right? That everything feels like we're being attacked. Everything feels like spiritual warfare when we're really at war with the busyness, right? Someone might ask you a question and you might feel irritation start to rise up before you can stop it. And by afternoon, survival mode is already in full effect, right? You're not thriving in that space. You're just enduring. You're checking boxes, but you're losing yourself. And at night, you're tired, but you're wired. Your body might be exhausted, but your mind is still running things, right? So you get this unrested sleep and you wake up in the morning feeling the same way you went to bed, right? Because you're still on. You scroll because you're too depleted to do anything meaningful, but too activated to actually rest. And the weekends don't really restore you anymore. They're just compressed versions of the weekdays. Errands, obligations, parties, events, catching up on what fell through the cracks, doing work, Sunday evening might even bring a new particular kind of dread as Monday comes up. And you're like, "Oh, I got the Mondays, I gotta do it again," right? And underneath all of that, there's this low hum that you learn to ignore. But it's sounding like I can't keep going like this. I can't keep doing this. This has got to stop. Or one day I might be finished with all of this and be able to actually rest, right? Does that sound familiar? Does that sound like you? If it does, you're not broken. You're not weak. And you're not bad at life or faith, right? You've simply been living outside of the rhythm that you were designed for. And that rhythm is what we're going to explore. Here's where we have to start. And I need you to open your ears, tune out all the rest of the things that are going on, because we've domesticated this truth into a weekend suggestion when it's actually one of the most radical statements in all of Scripture. Genesis 2:2-3 says, by the seventh day, God had finished the work he had been doing. So on the seventh day, he rested from all his work. Then God blessed the seventh day and made it holy because on it he rested from all the work of creating that he had done. God, the omnipotent creator who spoke galaxies into existence, rested. Not because he was tired, not because he needed to recover, not because he needed to take a nap, but because he was establishing a rhythm, a pattern, a sacred cadence that was woven into the fabric of creation itself. And here's what I need you to catch, right? The order matters. God rested on the seventh day, but Adam was created on the sixth day. which means that Adam's first full day of existence was a day of rest. Before Adam worked, he rested. Before he tended the garden, he experienced Sabbath. Rest preceded productivity in the divine order that God set forth. That's not incidental, friends, right? This is theological architecture. God was teaching something about the nature of existence. You don't have to earn rest through work. You work from a place of rest. That's like a Selah, right? Because if rest was important enough for God to model, it's certainly important enough for us to honor. God rested first so that you would never confuse your worth with your work. I need you to sit with that for a few seconds. Your worth was established before you did a thing. Before you could create anything, before you could build anything, before you could work anything, you are not valuable because of what you produce. You, my friends, my dreamers, right, are valuable because you are made in the image of God who rests. And that's not just the Father, right? Not just God the Father rested. Look at Jesus. Luke 5:16 says, "But Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed." The word often is crucial here, right? This wasn't occasional. This wasn't when he was burned out, right? This wasn't habitual. Every Sunday I go away and rest, right? This was regular. This was rhythmic, right? Jesus structured his life around withdrawal and engagement, solitude and community, pouring out and being filled back up. And the context matters, right? Luke 5:15 tells us that crowds of people were coming to hear him and be healed. That demand was real, I'm sure, right? There's only so much we can do with the people, right? Imagine crowds of people and not just like standing there peacefully listening to him, right? He was the Son of God. He was doing miracles and everybody wanted to be touched by the Son of God, right? So the demand was real. Whatever your demand you think it is, the demand for Jesus was real, right? The needs of the people were urgent and people wanted healing. They wanted to be touched, right? And in the face of that demand, Jesus still withdrew. This is counterintuitive to everything that we've been taught about productivity and ministry and responsiveness. There were sick people, right? There were large crowds. There was a real and urgent need. And Jesus walked away from everything when his tasks were done to be alone with the Father. And it wasn't like I finished every task on my list and now I'm going to take some time to be with God. It was like, all right, well, I'm done for the day. I'm a jet, y'all. I suggest you do something similar, but I'm gonna be out. I'm gonna hit the road. Yeah, I'll see y'all when I see y'all. There was no time. He didn't say, in 2 hours. I'll be back in 2 hours. All right. No, he just went away to be alone with the Father. Even Jesus, God in flesh, refused to live outside of that rhythm that God set forth for us to follow in the beginning. Lord Jesus, Son of God, Savior of the world, needed regular withdrawals, solitude, and rest. The idea that we can sustain meaningful life without it is actually lack of faith. It's arrogance. Now, I need to clear something up, right? Because most people carry distorted definitions of rest that make it feel impossible or irresponsible, right? Rest is not laziness. Laziness is avoidance of responsibility. Rest is the responsible honoring of your design. Rest is not disengagement. You can be fully engaged with life, present, attentive, connected from a place of rest. Rest isn't even quitting. Rest is recognizing that sustainable impact requires sustainable rhythms. So, what is rest? Rest is alignment with God. When you rest, you align yourself with how God designed the world to work. Rest is returning to presence. It interrupts the mental time travel that we do, the anxiety about the future, the regret about the past, right? And it grounds us in the now, in what's happening in this moment. Rest is listening instead of striving. It shifts the posture from output to input and from speaking to listening, from producing to receiving. And here's the line I want you to carry. If you don't carry anything else from this podcast today, rest is not the absence of movement. It is movement without the urgency. You can be active and rested. You can have things going on and be at peace. The difference is urgency. That frantic, driven, fear-based energy that makes everything feel desperate. That urgency, right? Rest is doing what's needed, the things that have to be done without the internal chaos that usually comes with it. And we have to name this thing directly because ignoring rest has consequences, spiritual consequences, right? When you're exhausted, hearing God becomes harder. The still small voice requires stillness to hear. When your internal world is noisy and you have all these anxious thoughts and you're racing, right? You're constantly experiencing mental chatter, right? God's voice gets drowned out in that. It's not that God stops speaking, but it's that you lose the capacity to listen. When you're exhausted, your discernment becomes clouded, and discernment requires clarity, and clarity requires rest. It's hard to be clear when you're not rested. You can't even see clear for real when you're not rested, right? When you're running on empty, every option begins to look the same. When you're exhausted, your trust erodes. right? And chronic busyness is often a trust issue. Underneath the packed schedule is a belief that if I don't do it, it won't get done. Rest requires trusting that God can handle what you set down, right? Rest is not where faith weakens, it's where trust deepens. And here's the thing about that. When we don't learn to rest, what we're really saying to God is, I don't believe that you can handle this. Rest says, God, I believe that if I take the time to rest in you, to rest with you, to rest my body, to rest my mind, to rest my spirit, if I take time to rest as you have given us, a rhythm for all throughout your word, that you can do more with my rest than I can do if I don't rest. That you can do more with less. That you can do more in the time that I take this time to step away from it, take my hands off of it and allow you space to work in it. You can do more with that than I could if I just kept running, right? So how much are you forfeiting when you don't take the rest? The song, right? I want to sing, but I don't want to sing at the same time. I'm going to sing it anyway. If you don't like my singing, then oh well. But it says, what a friend we have in Jesus. All my needs and grief to bear. What a privilege to carry everything to God in prayer. What peace we often forfeit. Oh, what needless pain we bear. All because we do not carry everything to God in prayer. Right? But our prayer life is predicated on our rest life. Because we can pray all day, but we can't rest in the fact that God can do what we prayed for. It's kind of counteractive, right? Let's talk about the effects that it has on us neurologically, right? Because here's where the science backs up the theology. And I also messed up some words in the beginning of that beautiful hymn, but I digress. God didn't just design rest theologically. He wired it into human physiology, right? Your nervous system has a built-in rhythm of activation and recovery. And when this rhythm is honored, you thrive. When it is chronically disrupted, you break down. Your autonomic nervous system has two main branches, okay? The sympathetic nervous system is like the accelerator, right? It helps to move everything forward. It mobilizes energy for action, right? It's exactly how it sounds, right? Heart rate increases, right? Our breathing becomes shallow. Our cortisol floods through our nervous, and this is designed for short-term survival, right? The parasympathetic nervous system is like the brake, right? Just like you were driving a car. It promotes recovery and restoration, right? Our heart rate slows down, breathing deepens, your body repairs and regenerates. And this is supposed to be your baseline. That's where you're supposed to spend most of your time, right? The problem is that most people live stuck in chronic activation. The sympathetic system is always on. The stressor never stops, right? And so the recovery phase never comes. And when the body does not feel safe, it cannot receive clarity, even from God. This is physiologically true, right? When your nervous system is in survival mode, the prefrontal cortex, where discernment happens, goes partially offline. You literally cannot think clearly or hear well when you're depleted. The body God gave you tells the truth about your pace. the tension, the fatigue, the inability to exhale. Go ahead and just do that. Take an inhale and exhale. These aren't problems to medicate away. They're signals to heed, to pay attention to. And here's something I want you to understand. Rest isn't something to do, right? It's not just something you do. It's someone you become. There are two different versions of you that show up depending on your rhythms. There's the exhausted you, right? The exhausted you is reactive to small things, right? Small things can trigger big responses from you, right? Exhausted you also can't listen well, not to God or people, right? Exhausted you snaps at the people you love. Exhausted you goes through the motions of faith, but actually is feeling nothing. 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 Exhausted you is physically present, but emotionally gone, checked out, right? It's like the song, your mind is here with me, but your mind is on the other side of town, right? You're not here. You're checked out. And then there's the rest of you. The rest of you is regulated, able to feel without being controlled by feelings. The rest of you can hear someone's pain and hold it without losing yourself. The rest of you prays and actually expects to hear something back and postures themselves in the position to hear something back. The rest of you is not afraid to sit in silence and doesn't feel the need to have to say something all the time in their prayer time. Rest of you can say no without feeling guilty and can say yes without resentment. Rest isn't what you do. Rest is who you become when you live in rhythm with God. Rested you can hold what exhausted you keeps dropping. Every day, your rhythms vote for which version of you is going to show up, right? Now, I know some of you who are listening, you're already feeling a little resistance. You might feel a little tight, right? Your shoulders might be up to your ears, and your chest might feel a little tight, and you're clenching at your jaw, and you may have the wrinkles in your forehead. And I want to invite you, before we do anything else, to just release those things. Relax your forehead, relax your eyes, relax your jaw. Drop your shoulders down away from your ears. Bring your hands to your chest and breathe in and out. Rest your hands. Let me name some of the things that might be coming up for you. You might be saying things in your mind like, if I slow down, everything's going to fall apart. I hear you. But the truth is, things may adjust. Some things may even temporarily decline. But the unsustainable pace that you are maintaining is not actually holding things together in the first place. It's actually holding you hostage. And eventually, if you don't choose to stop, your body or circumstances will choose for you. Rest helps you to be able to get into that space. But here's another something that might be going on in your head. Rest feels selfish, and other people need me. You can't pour from an empty cup, baby. You just can't. The version of you that shows up when you're depleted is not the version of you that people need. Rest is not selfish. Rest is how you become capable of sustaining generosity. I'll rest when this season is over is another phrase that you might be saying. But how long have you been saying this season? What if this is your life, not a temporary phase to survive? And I don't know how to rest. It makes me anxious, is something that I hear often, right? And I get that. For many people, especially those who have been in survival mode for years, stillness feels threatening. Your nervous system has adapted to chaos. And so quiet can feel wrong. And that's exactly why we have to start slow. We don't begin with weekend retreats. We definitely don't begin with silent meditation. We begin with one breath. 3 minutes. Small, consistent doses of regulation that teach your nervous system that stillness is safe. My worth really is tied to what I produce is another something that might be going on in your mind. And this is the deepest resistance. And let me remind you that it is a lie, right? It is a pervasive lie, reinforced by culture and sometimes, a lot of times, even by the church. It may not be said, but it is demonstrated. It has become the culture of environments. I'm just a messenger, but it's still a lie. Your worth was established in Genesis 1:27. You bear the image of God. That's it. That's your worth. Everything you produce is overflow, not the foundation. For those of you who may have been following around with me, you know I talk a lot about the Dream 8. And these are the 8 dimensions of a flourishing life. Rest is not one of the 8, but rest is the foundation beneath all of the 8. Before you dream, God restores the dreamer, right? Without rest, your spirit cannot hear God clearly. Your mind can't quiet the noise. Your body can't honor its limits. Your emotions can't regulate. Your relationships suffer because you show up depleted instead of present. Your sense of wonder dies because you're surviving instead of savoring. You cannot build a whole life on an empty soul. Rest is the foundation everything else is built on. Okay. So, Candace, what do we actually do with all of this? Here's the thing. Week 1 isn't about doing a lot. It's about beginning to notice, right? So, this week, I want you to simply notice. Where do you feel tired? Where do you feel pressure? Where do you feel rushed? Don't try to fix anything or change anything. Just notice. Awareness is the first act of rest. And then here is something else I want you to try. I want you to take one intentional pause per day. That's it, just one. It could be a breath, it could be a moment of stillness, it could be a short walk, it could be a quiet cup of coffee without looking at your phone. No rules, just one moment where you stop on purpose. This isn't about doing less, it's about listening more. Here's something else that you can try on. It's the last thing. Sit still. Place your hand on your heart and take a deep inhale through your nose and a slow exhale through your mouth. And whisper, be still and know. Then ask God, where are you in this moment? You can do this in 60 seconds. The goal is not length, it is frequency. Here's what I want to leave you with, friends. Rest is not a detour from your life. It is the ground your life was meant to grow from. This week is not about change. It is about beginning to listen and pay attention. And if God needed to cancel my flights and freeze my internet to get me to slow down, I wonder what He might be doing in your life right now to get your attention. Maybe the invitation isn't to push harder. Maybe the invitation is to receive what He's already offering. God rested first so that you would never, ever, ever confuse your worth with your work. You are not your productivity. You are His. You are His son. You are His daughter. And that is important to Him. Therefore, it's important to you. That's your identity. That's who you are. So, I'll see you next week. Till then, learn to notice when you're not rested and what's happening in your body, in the spaces as you're moving through your week. I love you. I'm grateful for you. I'm praying for you. And I want you to have an amazing week. Go forth and rest. I'll see you next week.